Jai.
Hey, Prabhu, yes, you're audible.
Hare Krishna. Thank you all for joining us this evening. We're going to discuss this evening the benefits and the glories of the Vaishnav and glorifying the Vaishnavas. So, despite faults in a speaker, despite faulty hearing, because the personality, the Vaishnav, is faultless, Krishna appears in full potency. So, we're going to divide this evening's meeting into three parts. The first part will be the benefits of glorying the Vaishnav devotees. And that will further be divided into three parts. We're going to discuss tonight also the pastimes and the glories of Aindra Prabhu. So we'll touch on a little bit on some of the pastimes that Ram Roy Prabhu didn't get to last week. For those of you who weren't here, we had one of Aindra Prabhu's personal associates giving a nice katha last week, and some of the earlier pastimes of Aindra in New York City, and also later when he was in Vrindavan. So the benefits of glorifying the devotees are threefold. So the first one is actually hearing about the devotees. We get the fruit of hearing the entirety of the Vedic literature, all Veda Purana. So such is the benefit of hearing about the devotees. Actually, it's said in one place that you cannot hear about the pastimes of the Lord's devotees without having previously studied all Veda Purana. So we get the fruit of studying all Vedic literature by hearing about the devotees of the Lord. But we also can't hear about the devotees of the Lord until we've heard Hari Katha for many, many lifetimes. So such is the power of glorifying the Mahabhagavats. Number two, in the benefits of hearing about the Vaishnavas, is hearing about the devotees destroys everything inauspicious in the heart, and we become fixed up on the path of devotional service. So, Yesham Smarana Matrena, this is one of the first verses of the Bhavishya Purana. It says, just by remembering the devotees of the Lord, we become purified. So what to speak of darshanat eva sandalaha, what to speak of actually having darshan, direct association with Lord's devotees. But actually in the Puranic literatures, it said even smarnam, even remembering the Lord's devotees, the heart is purified and everything inauspicious is removed from the heart. Ayendradas smarne sakala vignanash. Remembering Ayendradas Babaji, who is the complete zenith of devotional service, it removes obstacles out of the path of the devotee, and it purifies your heart. And Ayendradas Smarana, our remembrance of Aindra Prabhu, for many of us is our very life and soul. It is our bhajan. For us, Nam Sankirtan, for many of us, Nam Sankirtan is remembering Aindra Prabhu. For many of us, our Bhagavat Shravan, our studying of the Srimad Bhagavatam, is Aindra Prabhu. For many of us, going to Vrindavan is going to see Aindra Prabhu. So the third and final tenet of the benefit of hearing about the Lord's devotees, and at least in this context here, hearing about the pure Vaishnavas actually pleases the heart of Krishna, because it's understood that when we're discussing Hari Katha, this brings much pleasure to the devotee's heart. Hari Katha meaning the pastimes of the Lord and his names. But when we glorify the Lord's devotees, it brings transcendental pleasure to the heart of the Lord, because the devotees of the Lord have a mystical, you could say mystical relationship with the Lord, and such that they've completely bound up Krishna with the rope of love. So this is nicely said by Krishna himself in the Srimad Bhagavatam, 9th canto, where he says, I am completely, this is 9th canto, chapter 4, text 63. Krishna says, I am completely under the control of my devotees. Indeed, I am not at all independent. Because my devotees are completely devoid of material desires, I sit only within the cores of their hearts. What to speak of my devotee, even those who are devotees of my devotee are very dear to me. Bhaktir Bhakta Jana Priya. Those who are devotees of my devotee are very dear to me. So again, the three tenets and benefits of hearing about the Vaishnavas are: one, hearing about the Shuddha Bhaktas, we get the fruit of hearing all Veda Purana. Two, hearing about the Shuddha Bhaktas, the pure devotees of the Lord, destroys everything inauspicious, purifies the heart, and we become fixed up, ekadnishta, in devotional service. And three, hearing about pure Vaishnavas actually pleases the heart of Krishna. So there's a very nice passage from one book of Prabodhananda Saraswati Pad, where he lists the 6 virtues of the Gaura Bhaktas, the followers and the footsteps of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, the Gaura Priyajanas, the dear devotees of Mahaprabhu. So the 6 virtues that are listed by Prabodhananda Saraswati Pad are: 1, humbly thinking oneself lower than a blade of grass. So we hear this very often. It's one of the most quoted verses in the entirety of Gaudiya Vaishnava literature, of the Shikshastakam. So as far as this first virtue goes, we saw this emulated in Sripada Aindra Prabhu's pastimes. And just to recount a few, in 1998, Aindra Prabhu was at Radhakund, and he was there during Bahulastami. And they took their snan, they took bath in Radhakund, and the devotees went for kirtan, and there was no harmonium. So someone got Aindra a big pair of kartels, and he just started leading a kirtan, which lasted hours. And the devotees that were there, Gopal Prabhu, some of the intimate associates of Aindra Prabhu, were there for this Bahulastami in 1998. And they said it was to this day, still the sweetest kirtan they've ever been in. It was just completely transcendental. What the devotees experienced that night, it's world famous for those of us who try to familiarize ourselves with Aindra Prabhu. So at the end of this kirtan, everybody was sitting in silence after taking it all in, essentially, and Aindra Prabhu remarked, "This is the greatest kirtan I've ever had the privilege of being a part of." So despite Aindra Prabhu was actually leading the kirtan, he was the leader of the kirtan, quote unquote. His viewpoint was he was just having the beautiful opportunity to participate in Harinam Sankirtan with the devotees. So completely not on the egoic platform at all, seeing this as a group effort, Nam Sankirtan. And another commonly referred to pastime of Aindra Prabhu was his such humbleness in cleaning the toilets. He would often be found in the middle of the night by different guru coolies in the bathroom, scrubbing with acid. And he even remarked once that in order to attain Madhurya Ras, one has to clean the toilets. So despite being such a high personality, he was doing seemingly such low menial service. So that's the first tenet of the 6 virtues of the Gaura Bhaktas given by Prabodhananda Saraswati. The second one is natural gentleness and charm. So the Gaura Bhaktas are naturally gentle, and they're charming. Number 3, they speak words as sweet as nectar. When one hears from the lips of a Gaura Bhakta, it's like ambrosial nectar for the ears. And number 4, they spit at sense gratification. So they have a complete disinterest, which also is number 5, is disinterest in affairs of this world. I'm reminded of one pastime of Aindra Prabhu. He was invited to a wedding to do kirtan in Vrindavan, and he refused. Finally, somehow or another, the devotees convinced him, but he went and he had a blindfold on. It's a very hard picture to find online, but you can find it. And there's one picture of Aindra Prabhu leading kirtan, and he has a blindfold on. So he wouldn't even look. He had complete disinterest in affairs of this world. And number 6, finally, the 6th and final tenet given by Prabodhananda Saraswati is overwhelming love for Hari. So this is a characteristic, of course, of the Gaura Bhaktas. They're completely overwhelmed in divine love, intoxicated with love for Krishna. So last week, Aindra Prabhu's earlier pastimes were talked about in some detail by his personal associate, Ram Noy Prabhu. Of course, Aindra Prabhu was born in Arlington, Virginia in 1953, March 12th, according to Western calendars. He joined ISKCON in late 1972 in the Washington, D.C. temple. And actually, when he officially moved into the temple, it was Easter Sunday. He woke up his father, and he convinced his father, after some small quarrel, that it would be a good idea for his dad to drive him to the temple, and he was going to move in with the devotees full time. So eventually, Easter Sunday, 1972, his dad agreed and drove him to I think it was about 60 miles to the Washington, D.C. temple. And during the drive, his father actually asked him, don't you think that it's limiting yourself to move into monistic life? And Aindra had a very nice remark that really shows you where his consciousness was. To retort to his father, he said, well, externally, it appears as if I'm limiting myself, moving into a monistic life, renouncing the association with women, dedicating my life fully to studying of Shastra Swadhyaya, Nam Sankirtan, the chanting the holy names of the Lord. But actually, entering into monistic life, I'm opening the door to the unlimited. So seemingly, it's limiting. According to Western standards, monistic life is extremely limiting. But Aindra, right out of the gate, he had a deeper understanding that actually he was coming in to the unlimited. And early on, Aindra also spent some time in the Chicago temple. I don't know how long he was necessarily there, but one devotee, I was hearing one pastime of Aindra Prabhu, that he remarked that even in the early days when Aindra was in Chicago, he would be found sleeping in the evening with just Gumsha in the stairwell. So renounced early on. And he joined it in an earlier time during ISKCON. So at this time, still there was 8 to 10 hour Nam Sankirtan days going on, especially in the Washington, D.C. temple. Also on Saturdays, they would have 14-hour Nam Sankirtan days. And so when he joined, it was full on 8-10 hours Nam Sankirtan every day. And this went on for years and years and years throughout all of Aindra's pastimes in America, and also later when he went to India and he started the 24-hour Kirtan. In those early days of the 24-hour Kirtan, he was doing minimum 8 hours Nam Sankirtan also in India. So we see he was the complete zenith of Nam Sankirtan, even from the very get-go of his time. So he moved to India in 1986, and like we were talking about, he was doing no less than eight hours Nam Sankirtan daily, because in the beginning there was just him trying to get something started, trying to start the 24-hour Kirtan for the pleasure of Srila Prabhupada, and for the pleasure of Nitai Sachi Sutta, for the pleasure of Krishna Balaram, and for the pleasure of Gaur Nitai. So he lived a total of 24 years in Vrindavan, and we see that as time went on, he was not coming down out of his room so much. So for many, many years and years and years, he was doing 8-10 hours Nam Sankirtan daily. I mean, just think about that. Think about that's no exaggeration. He was doing 8 to 10 hours Nam Sankirtan daily for years. And then gradually we see in his later pastimes that he became more reclusive. And he would come down in the evenings, given his voice was adequate. He suffered towards the end of his pastimes on this earth with throat issues. So given his throat was an ideal condition to sing, he would be coming down at his evening kirtan slot. But that was only in the later time. In the earlier times, he was out of his room doing kirtan most of the day. But as time went on, he was spending much more time in his room, and he was doing minimum 4 hours daily of Sri Murti Seva. Of course, those of us who are familiar with Aindra, some of us have been to his room or seen pictures of his room, how elaborate his altar was, how much bhav he had for Sri Murti Seva. He would spend so many hours a day, specifically in the nighttime, doing his Murti Seva. So we see in the pastimes of Aindra Prabhu that he was actually an embodiment of the entire Panchanga Bhakti. He's most known for Nam Sankirtan, and rightly so. He was a revolutionist for Nam Sankirtan. There's no one like him. He completely revolutionized Kirtan. It's inconceivable, his contribution to the spreading of the holy name of Krishna. But he also was an embodiment of the other four angas out of the Pancha Anga. He was also an embodiment of the other four angas. So, of course, Nam Sankirtan, he is most famous for. He coined his style of kirtan, down home stompin' Braj Basi style kirtan. Or also he called it progressive kirtan. Like we have progressive rock. Aindra Prabhu's style was progressive kirtan. And he also, in one place, he mentioned that basically he incorporated styles in Bengali kirtan and Vrindavan style kirtan, down home stompin' Braj Basi kirtan. So Aindra's style of kirtan is like that. It's if you were to mix Bengali kirtan and down home stompin' Braj Basi kirtan. And again, he coined the term progressive kirtan for his style. There's two types of rag kirtan. Drupad style is a little bit more rigid, and he took from what he called the Kayal style, which is, I believe it translates roughly to fantasy. There's a little bit more room for alankars, playing with the ragas for the pleasure of their lordships. So going up a few octaves, adding some ornamentation in the rags, right? And his mood in which he chanted kirtan it's just completely unparalleled. He had such an emphasis on Shuddhanam, on pure devotional content, the quality of the chanting. And he was such an inspiration for us to be enthusiastic in our performance of kirtan, because sometimes there's a tendency to space out, even while we're performing kirtan. Maybe we're just playing with the rug, and maybe we're spacing out. But he called this being a half-baked cookie. So just like when we offer cookies to their lordships, we don't offer half-baked cookies. You know, it's moist and it's not all the way finished. So in the same way, when we do kirtan, it's full on. We're fully baked, full on, full enthusiasm, utsaha, full enthusiasm for the pleasure of Gaurnitai, for the pleasure of Radhesham Sundar. He was a complete embodiment of this principle. Actually, in one pastime, they were doing fast-paced kirtan. You know, the kirtan was really picking up. And this one, I believe he's a Guru Kuli, was sitting right next to Aindra Prabhu. And he wasn't enthusiastic at all. Everybody else is jumping in, but this one Guru Kuli, he was sitting more or less idly. And Aindra was trying to get him pumped up. And the Guru Kuli told Aindra, you know, I just do casual kirtan. I just do casual kirtan. And Aindra retorted, we don't do casual kirtan. So we're not doing casual kirtan. It's full on, full engagement. All the psychophysical energies are completely and fully engaged. So we see that Aindra had such a deep relationship with the holy name, as is sung by Vishnu Chakravarti Thakur. We sing this every morning. Mahaprabhu Kirtana Nitya Gita Varite Madhyan Manasoda Sena Romancha Kampas Tudanga Bhajo Vande Guru Shri Charanara Vindam. Chanting the holy name, dancing in ecstasy, singing and playing musical instruments, the spiritual master is always gladdened by the Sankirtan movement of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Because he is relishing the mellows of pure devotion within his mind, sometimes his bodily hairs stand on end. He feels quivering in his body, tears flow from his eyes like waves. I offer my respectful obeisances unto the lotus feet of such a spiritual master. So Aindra admitted in his all humility that he was chanting minimum 2 lakhs nam daily. So there's 16 names, of course, in the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra. So 58 rounds in truth, if you were to do the math, is 100 lakhs of the Maha Mantra. So he was chanting minimum 116 rounds daily, 2 lakhs nam daily. So it takes many, many hours and much discipline to do that. And he was doing this daily, and he would not eat or drink anything until he finished his nam vrat every day. 116 rounds daily. He would only have 1 meal a day. So he had such a deep relationship with Harinam Prabhu, the holy name of the Lord, that actually at one point there was a Thomistic energy. As he describes, it was sent by a mystic yogi. Some mystic yogi was putting him in a catatonic state when he was in his room. and he was being put into some deep Thomistic state. And he wasn't able to chant. He was completely, his body was like arrested. He was in suspended animation, essentially. And in his room, an Akashvani, sky voice, that is to say, came, and it was reverberating. The most celestial sound of the Hare Krishna Mahamantra reverberated in his room and dissipated the Thomistic energy and the influence of the mystic yogi. And such is the deep relationship that he had with the holy name. And this pastime, we see that the pure name doesn't depend on our fleshy tongues. The pure name can manifest wheresoever the pure name would like. So this is a practical example. Even though he wasn't chanting the Hare Krishna Mahamantra, pure sound vibration appeared in his room and dispelled this Thomistic energy. So this is the first tenet of Pancha Anga Bhakti, Nam Sankirtan. And of course, he was such an example in Sri Murti Seva, as Vishnu Chakravarti Thakur also sings, Shri Vigrahara Dhananityananda Shingaravtan Vandira Majanado Yuktasya Bhaktamscha Niyanjatopi Vande Guru Shri Charanadavindam. The spiritual master is always engaged in the temple worship of Shri Shri Radha and Krishna. He also engages his disciples in such worship. They dress the deities in beautiful clothes and ornaments, clean their temple, and perform other similar worship of the Lord. I offer my respectful obeisances unto the lotus feet of such a spiritual master. So we were discussing earlier how he was doing minimum roughly about 4 hours Murti Seva a day, taking care of his deities in his room at different intervals. In his pastimes, he was also taking care of the deities in the temple, Radhe Shyam Sundar. He was dressing just Krishna at one point, and for the pleasure of Srimati Radharani. Also, he was dressing both Radhe Shyam Sundar at one point. The third, Pancha Anga Bhakti, Dham Vas, Braj Dham Vas. And of course, Aindra was the zenith of this principle, as is said in another place by Prabodhananda Saraswati. He says, patiently tolerating hundreds of kicks, millions of insults, and the constant onslaught of hunger, thirst, cold, heat, and hundreds of other sufferings, penniless, agitated, shedding great showers of tears, and calling out the names of Shri Shri Radha and Krishna in a piteous voice, he wanders in the land of Vrindavan. So Aindra was like that. He suffered, his material body suffered diseases, and he had such Dham Nishta. He was so fixed and staying in the Dham, he wouldn't even consider leaving in order to attain medicine. He left Vrindavan very few times. He would go to Delhi for some preaching program. There's a video of him on YouTube there, giving one nice katha after doing kirtan in the Delhi temple. He would go to Delhi to get his cassettes for the albums he was releasing, if it was for service, but he would come back and he would sleep inside Vrindavan. And a few times he left to go to, of course, Navadvip. He was in Mayapur several times. And one pastime that shows how deep of affection Aindra had for the holy Dham, the holy place of pilgrimage, Sri Vrindavan, is they were leaving once. I believe they were going to Delhi. They were all in a car. A bunch of devotees were in the car with Aindra Prabhu. And there was a fly buzzing around in the car. The windows were up. And Aindra rolled down the window and then let the fly out, and the fly left. And later he remarked that it was because the fly was a Brajbasi, which are not ordinary living entities. They're considered even greater than the highest demigods, those entities that reside in Braj Bhumi. So he didn't want to take a Brajbasi, one who resides in Vrindavan, outside of Vrindavan. Once a devotee, I think it was a Kinchana Krishna Prabhu, he came to Vrindavan, and he came on a Thursday, and it was also an Ekadashi, something like that, which it's not ideal to travel on Thursdays, and some devotees say it's also not ideal to travel on Ekadashis. So when he saw Aindra Prabhu, he apologized, Prabhu, I know, I'm sorry, like I know it's Thursday, it's Ekadashi. And Aindra remarked, I would break any rule to come to Vrindavan. So such bhav he had, such deep emotion and connection he had with with the holy land of Krishna. He also said once that if you're leaving Vrindavan and you do not cry, then you never were in Vrindavan. And many devotees are anxious to say that Navadvip is non-different than Vrindavan, which is our Gaudiya Siddhanta. But Aindra also pointed out that as much as Nitya Navadvip is non-different than Vrindavan, Vrindavan is non-different than Navadvip. So in one room conversation in the evening, Aindra said, my room is Nitya Navadvip. Here's his Nitai Sachi Sutta. He's worshiping them daily. And he said, if you do not understand this, if you do not know this, then you're a fool. So he was simultaneously living in Navadvip and he was living in Vrindavan. The fourth tenet of Panchanga Bhakti, Sadhu Sangha, he had such appreciation for the association of devotees. And we see how absorbed he was in Prabhupada Vani. Devotees remarked that when they would walk past Aindra's room at sometimes 1 in the morning, going to their 24-hour kirtan slots, going down for their shift, they would hear out of Aindra's room coming Prabhupada Katha. He was listening to Prabhupada's tapes. And one time Aindra was in a car with a bunch of devotees and someone put on a Prabhupada tape. And within just a few seconds, Prabhupada had finished maybe a sentence or two, not even. And Aindra immediately knew what lecture. He's like, oh, this is that lecture where Prabhupada says this and this and this. So he had studied so thoroughly Prabhupada's lectures. He would preach into the evening with his devotees, late into the night. They would ask a few questions and he would preach to them. He would take so much time, 2-3 hours, sometimes 4 hours, explaining Vaishnava Siddhanta, Bhakti Tattva Gyan, the deep esoteric truths of the Gaudiya Vaishnavas. And when he would give class in the temple, he would go on. He was famous for his seminars. He would go on 2, 3, sometimes he would push even past 3 hours in the temple room for a standard Bhagavatam class because he had so much relishment for associating devotees and glorifying the Lord. The final tenet is Bhagavat Shravan, or the studying of Srimad Bhagavatam in the Gaudiya Vaishnava literatures. And we see in Aindra's pastimes that he had actually studied all of Prabhupada's books. He'd studied them very thoroughly, including all of the Bhakti Godheads, all of Prabhupada's small books. He was extremely well studied in all of Prabhupada's books. And he was also extremely well studied in all the Goswami Granthas, all the literatures of the predecessor acharyas. He had such a deep appreciation and such a deep understanding of Gaudiya Vaishnava Siddhanta. And this is really, we really see this come out in his book. Prabhupada came to him in a dream and told him to write a book on book distribution called The Art of Transcendental Book Distribution. And some of us have probably read this book. And you'll see in Aindra's book that each sentence is like an entire verse of itself. There's so much Siddhanta, so much conclusion, Vaishnava conclusions, just in one sentence of his book. You really could break it down, his sentences, into verses. It's such a deep book, and you see that he grasped and thoroughly understood all the deep esoteric truths of the Gaudiya Vaishnava acharyas. So in the pastimes of Aindra Prabhu, there was one instance where a Vaishnav came to Aindra and was getting his blessing, getting Aindra's blessing to leave Vrindavan. And he was going to move to some place and get a job. And Aindra asked, will you get married? And this devotee said, yes, Prabhu. And then Aindra said, that's nonsense. Why will you get married? And this devotee remarked that in the presence of Sripada Aindra Prabhu, he wasn't actually able to think of a reason why he wanted to get married, because Aindra was such an embodiment of renunciation. So he just was silent. And Aindra, because of his influence, this devotee felt so much detachment. And then the devotee remarked, but Aindra Prabhu, what about my material desires? And Aindra said, just do what I did. Perform 8 to 10 hours Nam Sankirtan daily. So this is his recommendation. And this may seem a little bit intangible for some of us that are maybe working or maybe in a temple situation that we feel like we can't perform that much Harinam Sankirtan. But we can still, in our small way, make steps to work our way there. He said in one rooftop conversation, Aindra Prabhu said, I have no sympathy for anyone who doesn't do at least 6 hours Nam Sankirtan daily. So that was a standard that he wanted for his devotees. In one pastime of Aindra Prabhu, he started kirtan in front of Gaur Nitai. So if you've ever been to the Krishna Balaram Mandir, Gaur Nitai are situated on the far left-hand side of the temple, and Radhe Shyam Sundar are situated on the far right-hand side. So Aindra Prabhu started the kirtan. They're sitting down. He's playing harmonium, and they were in front of Gaur Nitai. And then as the kirtan picked up a little bit, he slid the harmonium all the way over to Radhe Shyam Sundar. And so there's reasoning for this. This might seem just like an external thing, but actually his internal meditation, which he remarked many times, is first you address the Odarya Nam of Hare Krishna Mahamantra. So he, taking from Srila Prabhupada's own teachings in the introduction to teachings of Lord Chaitanya, also in the introduction to Chaitanya Charitamrita, Prabhupada says that in the Hare Krishna Mahamantra, it can also refer to Gaur Nitai. So this is the understanding that Aindra Prabhu gave, was this is the Odarya Nam. The Hare Krishna Mahamantra has two features, the Madhurya Svarup and the Odarya Svarup. So the Odarya Svarup being addressing Gaur Nitai, and of course the Madhurya Svarup addressing Radha and Krishna. So he would begin his meditation, Japa Vrat or Nam Sankirtan, with meditating on Gaur Nitai, and then gradually coming into the Madhurya Svarup of Radha and Krishna. And of course, eventually, Aindra Prabhu wound up his pastimes in this material world, and there's transcendental reasoning for that, but we won't discuss that now. But there is transcendental leaving. There is a transcendental reason for him leaving the way he did, and during his departure, he had one last Jamuna Snan. He bathed in Jamuna one last time, and before entering, his body ultimately becoming ash. And so I also wanted tonight to discuss a little bit about the teachings of Aindra Prabhu and the YRC. So for those of us who haven't heard of the YRC, this is his Yuga Dharma Resurgence Coalition. And the idea for this is embodied in 10 principles. So the 10 tenets, or the objectives, you could say, of Aindra Prabhu's YRC program, I'm just going to read them actually, and we'll discuss them a little bit. So again, this is the 10 objectives for the YRC, the Yuga Dharma Resurgence Coalition, which many of us are taking part in every day. So number 1, to rectify the philosophical deviations leading to the marginalization of Harinam Sankirtan in contemporary Gaudiya Vaishnava society. So just to break that down a little bit, to rectify the philosophical deviations. So the deviations from understanding that our Eka Anga Bhakti is Nam Sankirtan, our Param Sadhana is Nam Sankirtan, to rectify that and bring Harinam Sankirtan back into its forefront and into its rightful place in the forefront of our Gaudiya Vaishnava society. Number 2, to prioritize the daily propagation of Nam Sankirtan Yagya and the managerial mindset of Gaudiya Vaishnava leadership. Number 3, to encourage grassroots Nam Sankirtan resurgence whenever and wherever institutional management fails to facilitate or support the propagation of Nam Sankirtan. Number 4, to encourage the worldwide establishment of local Nam Sankirtan core groups, both within and beyond the managerial jurisdictions of various temples and institutions. Number 5, by serious worldwide propagation of the all-powerful holy name through the medium of mass Harinam Sankirtan, forcefully augment the piety of the populace in order to efficiently dismantle the global dominance of heartless, demoniac, Kali Yuga corporatist governments and bring sanity and order to the social order. Number 6, to offer short-term, long-term Nam Sankirtan experience and training opportunities for serious, pure devotional candidates at the Krishna Balaram Mandir in Vrindavan. Programs of a similar nature and at other venues are encouraged worldwide. Number 7, to host a worldwide web network newsletter as a communication form explicitly for inspiration, Siddhantic edification and discussion amongst dedicated Harinam Sankirtan devotees. Number 8, 2, via extended indoor and outdoor performances of Harinam Sankirtan, help instill into the hearts of the general mass of devotees a solid experiential faith in the Yuga Dharma in an attempt to revitalize the Krishna consciousness movement. Number 9, to help sincere devotees transcend mundane affection and get Shuddhanam Ruchi and relish the immortal nectar for which every soul is always anxious. And finally, number 10, to help sincere devotees attain life's ultimate goal, unalloyed love for Krishna, and go back home, back to Godhead. So these objectives are very much applicable in our lives. So encouraging Nam Sankirtan inside of managerial mindsets, doing Nam Sankirtan, participating with local temples and going and firing up the kirtans, but also going with the Gaura Bhaktas into the streets, spilling out into the streets, outside of the managerial mindsets even, and spreading the Yuga Dharma. So in one rooftop conversation, I wanted to discuss a little bit with the time we have left of Aindra's teachings. And we can read a little bit from his book. We can also read a little bit from conversations with Aindra. So we're going to start here with rooftop conversations. So let's just try to really pay attention and have, ekadristi, a single gaze, and really try to absorb this pure devotee's teachings because it's for our ultimate benefit. So, okay. There's only one Dharma in Kali Yuga. Those who understand that will make good progress in Krishna consciousness. And those who have every reason in the book why they shouldn't, is given by all of our acharyas. All other angas of devotional service are meant to support your engagement in Nam Sankirtan. If they detract you from your engagement and Sankirtan, then they are not Dharma. It is adharma. Dharma becomes adharma. There is only one Dharma, and that is Nam Sankirtan. Everything else becomes dharmic when it supports that one Dharma, Nam Sankirtan. This should be clearly understood. If you don't understand it, that means you have not understood the philosophy of Krishna consciousness. If something retracts or distracts you from your absorption in Nam Sankirtan, then it is an anartha. All other angas of devotional service become successful by the grace of Nam, the holy name. Then your deity worship is useful. Then your management is useful. Then your grihastha ashram becomes useful. If your grihalok the members of your grihalok become members of your Sankirtan party, one big happy Sankirtan party. Your wife will play kartals, your son plays mridanga, then it is useful. Otherwise, it's a joke, a complete distraction and a waste of a human form of life. If someone is pure and he is doing Nam Sankirtan, then that is the best form of sadhu sangha. Then your sadhu sangha is complete. And of course, what is philosophy for? Ultimately, philosophy is to convince you to take shelter of the holy name by performing Nam Sankirtan. That is the purpose of philosophy. Philosophy is to help you give shape to your Nam Bhajan. Philosophy is to convince you that Krishna is the supreme personality of Godhead. Therefore, his name, being non-different than himself, is worthy of your service and surrender. That is Bhagavat Siddhanta. You can philosophize, but if you don't come to the point of understanding the need to surrender to the holy name, then all of your philosophy is useless. In another place, Aindra Prabhu said, if you want to increase your chances of getting the favorable glances of Srimati Radharani, then do more Nam Sankirtan. If you want to guarantee your progress to the spiritual platform, if you want to guarantee your transferal to the Bhoma Leelas of Krishna, so that you can further be trained to fulfill Krishna's ultimate purpose for manifesting his eternal Leelas in the material world, to attract the conditioned souls back home, back to Godhead. If you want to accomplish all of that, then there is a very easy way of doing it. And what is it? That's the way that Lord Chaitanya recommended in the age of Kali. There is no other way. You will not get there by any other way. Don't think it will be easier to get there by any other way. If you want the highest benefit, it is the greatest meditation of all meditations. It is the greatest smarana, the greatest remembrance. It is the greatest worship, archana. It is the greatest of everything. Whatever you can hope to accomplish by performing any other anga devotional service, you can achieve that and much more simply by taking shelter of Harinam. And the most recommended powerful process of taking shelter of Harinam is to perform Nam Sankirtan. I'm trying to say, hey, recognize this. Let's do more of this. There was a time when I would perform no less than 8 or 10 hours of Nam Sankirtan Yagya every day. So this is where Aindra says himself, in all humility, that at one point in his life, he was performing no less than 8 to 10 hours of Nam Sankirtan daily. And on Saturdays, no less than 15 hours a day. This is from Aindra's own lips. I don't know if you had that kind of experience. Because when I joined Krishna consciousness movement, Prabhupada wrote a letter to my temple president expressing his pleasure in our 14-hour Nam Sankirtan days. And we were going out in dhoti and shaved heads, not karmi clothes that it later turned into, which gave rise to the Hare Krishna phobia, which somehow or another has gained a foothold in this movement. 14-hour Nam Sankirtan days, because you have to do it, and you have to do a lot of it if you want to experience what it's like to be completely immersed in the holy name. And that experience will go with you in your heart for the rest of your life. That's the experience that I'm experiencing of years and years and years of no less than 8 to 10 hours a day. I don't sympathize with anyone that can't do it for at least 6 to 10 hours, Nam Sankirtan daily. At least while you have what other youthful vitality is left. There's 24 hours of the day, and how many days are we dedicating our energy in the human form of life to the performance of the Yuga Dharma? The Yuga Dharma is the only Dharma in this age of Kali. Everything else is Kaitava Dharma, practically speaking, unless it somehow or another supports your enthusiasm and fixation for the performance of Sankirtan, then those other activities, even if they are devotional activities, they are considered Kaitava Dharma in one form or another. So just see how much of an emphasis and how much of a bhav Aindra Prabhu had for Nam Sankirtan. It's completely unparalleled. It's completely unparalleled. For thousands of years, Kirtan's never going to be the same on planet Earth. He completely revolutionized our consciousness and our you could say our viewing, or our how do you say, our understanding of the Yuga Dharma. And finally, I wanted to finish by reading one thing from Sripada Aindra Prabhu's book, The Heart of Transcendental Book Distribution. And he's taking from one saying of Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati. He says, in Kali Yuga, we may consider ourselves theistically enriched to the extent that we actually help to promote the cause of congregational kirtan of Krishna's holy name. One more time. In Kali Yuga, we may consider ourselves theistically enriched to the extent that we actually help to promote the cause of congregational kirtan of Krishna's holy name. Indeed, the degree of support we offer to the propagation of Nam Sankirtan is irrefutably the sole measure of our unflinching trust in the personality of Godhead and his precepts descending via Acharya Parampara. Conversely, we may be considered as atheistical to the extent that we, unfaithfully thinking that all wants cannot be fulfilled by congregational chanting and dancing, minimize or obstruct in various ways the propagation of Shuddhanam Sankirtan. We should do well to remember that in this age, both the godly and the demoniac dwell in the same body. The extent of the latter proportionate to the measure of the extent of the latter proportionate to the measure of anarthas yet to be eradicated. The trend toward one or another temperament ultimately reflects an individual's purity of purpose. So again, giving so much emphasis to Nam Sankirtan in this age of Kali. So I wanted to open it up now for any questions or any comments. Maybe somebody could share some pastimes of Aindra Prabhu. Would anybody like to say anything at this junction? Jai. Is there any questions at all before we finish?
Thank you so much, Prabhu, for going into really the tattva behind Aindra Prabhu's life and his pastimes. Um, I don't know enough about him, and so I wanted to know like how he left the world.
Okay,
Yeah.
very good question. So um, this could be a deep subject matter, but essentially on the official website online says July 10th. July 10th in the evening, sometime around midnight, give or take, devotees smelt, combustion in the brahmachari ashram there, right off of the Krishna Balaram Mandir. And later they discovered it coming from Ayandra's room, and they eventually gained entry to the room, and it was full of smoke, and it was obvious there was a fire. And Ayendra was found clasping the lotus feet of Nitai and his Nitai Sachi Sutta deities. He, I think the official cause of death was, lack of oxygen. So essentially, he was cooking for his deities, and there was some type of gas leak, essentially. And that evening, when he went to cook for his deities at a specific time, he had a very specific time in which he would be cooking for his deities, 10:48. He turned on the oven, or small stove, Indian style kind of. I think he had it shipped from America to India in pieces, and he later assembled it. But when he turned it on, because the gas had been leaking, there was an explosion. So there was some, of course, scarring in the front portion of his body where the fireball engulfed his physical form. And he tried to get out. The soundproofing around his room was flammable. So it was, everything went up in flames pretty quickly. And, it seems like he tried to get out the window. He tried to bang against the window with a cup or something. I can't remember. There's some object he used to try to get out. He probably tried the door, and he wasn't able to get out. And you have to imagine the room is engulfed in flames. There's smoke. He can't see. It's a very intense experience. And so when he realized that there was no going anywhere, he clasped the lotus feet of Nityananda Prabhu, and he left this mortal world and wound up his pastimes. And there's deeper understandings for that. Ayendra Prabhu, in one place, he said he thought he would leave his body in the Jamuna, because he had a dream once that he went into the Jamuna, and when he came out in his Manjari Swarup, and Radha and Krishna were there on the bank of the Jamuna. I heard one devotee say that he was admitting towards the end of his life, actually, that he wanted to leave soon. It was his desire, and he wanted to go back to Godhead, and Krishna ultimately fulfilled that desire. And there's also one devotee that remarked that he actually had the desire to leave in front of his deities the way he did. Actually, he had a desire to leave in that way, to leave his body at the lotus feet of his deities. And he's still there. In fact, his quote unquote ashes, his samadhi, is there in his room currently while we're speaking. And it's understood that he was just a misunderstood personality. And so on this particular evening, when he was engaged in his Ashtakali Smaran, he had a very deep relationship with their lordships, Radhesham Sundar. And according to his internal meditations, he would conduct his activities on a daily basis. And this particular evening, it's said by Mahanidhi Maharaj that Ayendra Prabhu got the darshan of Srimati Radharani. And not to be too esoteric or too fanatic, but for those of us who accept Ayendra Prabhu as our Guru Maharaj, Shiksha Guru, we understand this to be so, that because of his being so misunderstood, being such a powerful devotee, it was very similar to Vamsidas Babaji. And Vamsidas, it was said by Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati that to his disciples to not associate with Vamsidas Babaji because they would misunderstand him. Not saying that he wasn't a pure Vaishnav, but just that his bhav was such that he would be easily misunderstood. And Ayendra, we could say, is maybe something like that. He had such a unique mood and method that he was easily misunderstood. And so this evening, on July 10th, 2010, at 10:48, when he was engaged in his internal meditations, Srimati Radharani is said to have appeared to him and said, "Come with me." And like that, he left this mortal world, and our hearts are heavy. But we can find enthusiasm because he said in one place that all we have to do is perform Nam Sankirtan and assist him in the spreading of Nam Sankirtan, and he'll personally take us back home, back to Godhead. So for those of us who are taking shelter of the lotus feet of Sripada Aindra Prabhu, this is it for us. We simply just want to spread the glories of the holy name, knowing that it's Aindra Prabhu's promise. If we just help him in this one simple thing of Nagar Nam Sankirtan, chanting in the streets, and Nam Sankirtan, just chanting in general, that he'll personally take us back, because he was such a powerful devotee. He was such a Mahabhagavat. And what is the message of the Mahabhagavats? In the Skanda Purana, it's said, Mahabhagavat Nityam Kalau Kurvanti Kirtanam, that the Mahabhagavats perform Nam Sankirtan in the age of Kali. That's their sole purpose and intent. So like this, it's described by Mahadadi Maharaj that there's esoteric reasoning for Aindra leaving the body the way he did. And we also touched a little bit on the material side of things, how materially he left his body. Does that answer your question, Prabhu?
Wow, I didn't know that. Thank you so much, Prabhu, for shedding light on that.
Yeah. Is there any other questions? Would anybody like to make any comments on Sripada Aindra Prabhu, on Vaishnava Tattva, anything at all?
Hare Krishna Prabhu. I like that pastime you shared of how Aindra Prabhu started off Kirtan in front of Gaurnitai and moved over to Shri Radha Samsundar.
Jai.
Just in how Prabhupada written in the Chaitanya Charitamrita introduction,
Yes.
the Audarya Nam, that is the Hare Krishna mantra, can also refer to Gaurnitai.
Yes, this is a very important point. And actually, I found one lecture of Aindra Prabhu's that he even said that 50% of your japa should be chanted to the lotus feet of Nityananda Prabhu, because he had such a deep relationship with Nityananda Prabhu. And yeah, he remarked in this one instance that 50%, at least 50% of your japa, the meditation, your internal dhyan, is on Nityananda Prabhu. But yeah, that's a beautiful pastime where he slides the harmonium over. It shows that principle of first approaching Adorya Swarup and then Madhurya Swarup. Would anybody else like to make any comments or have any questions before we close out?
I had a question.
Okay.
My question is, what made you be so attracted to Aindra Prabhu?
Well, Krishna is the all attractive, and because Aindra Prabhu has bound up Krishna in his heart, ultimately Aindra Prabhu is so attractive. And for myself, as far as personally speaking, I came to the movement through Nam Sankirtan, and so when I found Aindra Prabhu and his albums and his teachings, it was just everything to me. It was everything to me. And I don't know. I would say a short answer would be that because of his absorption in Nam Sankirtan, that's everything that I was looking for in my life. I considered before I met the devotees, I was already doing kirtan, and I considered that to be the ultimate prayojan of my life. And then meeting the devotees introduced me to Aindra Prabhu. Of course, I had not met him in his physical form, but in his teachings and his albums. They introduced me to his albums, and it just completely revolutionized my kirtan. Like we were discussing in the beginning, for many of us, Aindra is, Nam Sankirtan. That when we're taking the Nam Sankirtan inside of our mind's eye, we're meditating on Aindra Prabhu. And many of us, when we go to Vrindavan, we're completely immersed in Aindra Smarna. We go to his room. That's the ultimate dham for most of us, because as he said himself, his room is Nityanavadvip. So it's just I guess to give a short answer, it's completely impossible for me not to be completely in love with everything Aindra Prabhu said and did. And it's just been like that ever since I came across his albums, essentially.
Thank you very much, Guruji. I also had one more query, just a technical query. You gave the name of Aindra Prabhu's Kirtan style, the Navadvip plus Vrindavan. What's the name?
He down hone stompin' Braj Basi style and progressive kirtan.
So could you just spell the first one?
The first one, the sentence,
Yeah.
down hone stompin'. Okay, so you have to understand the origin of this. He comes from Virginia, so down home stomping is kind of like a southern saying. So he, being from Virginia, that's where the influence comes in of this title, in my opinion. Down home stomping. You know what I mean, Prabhu? Like down home stomping, like stomping. Does that make sense?
No.
Yeah, I mean,
Stomp is it stomping or stopping?
Stomping, yeah, but
stomping.
he would
Okay.
the G's silent. When you hear him say it, he would just say stomping, down home stomping,
Yes.
Rajbasi style. Does that make sense? Does that make more sense?
Yes, this makes more sense. So down home stomping Rajvasi style.
Yes, that's it. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, and again, he also called it progressive kirtan. That's a little more simple.
Yes. I also wanted to share, if you allow,
Please.
that even in my Krishna consciousness, I have seen, when I first heard, I did hear many other kirtans, but when I first heard Aindra Prabhu's kirtans, they were truly like of a different level. So ever since I've heard, there has been special type of inspiration in Krishna consciousness. So to whoever is there, I would also recommend, there's this on YouTube, there is memories of Aindra Prabhu by different associates of Aindra Prabhu. So I very much relished. I'm not sure if anyone has watched, but I would suggest, if time permits, they are very nectarian, the pastimes which are mentioned there.
Yes. Yeah, and I mentioned some of them this evening.
Yes.
Yeah, that's a very nice resource for those of us who would like to familiarize ourselves with Aindra Prabhu and his pastimes. That's a nice resource. There's plenty of opportunity for that online. We're very fortunate. But yeah, his kirtan is unparalleled, complete Shuddhanam. And he'd be fasting all day, no water, no food. And when he would do his evening kirtan, he was so hungry and thirsty, not for food or material things, but he was hungry and thirsty for Krishna. Kshud, food, or hunger, Trishna, thirst. It was directed towards, he had Radha Krishna Trishna. He was completely thirsty and overwhelmed with hunger for their lordships. So we hear that and we feel that when we listen to his kirtans. They're so powerful, so soul steering. So quite naturally, we become attracted. Is there anything else before we close out this evening's session? Jai. All right, Prabhus. Well, thank you all for your association. I feel very grateful to have had the opportunity to discuss the glories of the Vaishnavas, discuss Aindra's pastimes with you this evening. I hope you have a beautiful evening. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Thank you, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna.